So maybe if we could just introduce each panelist one by one, starting from the left-hand side, just so the audience knows the true level of expertise. Just maybe if you could just take a minute and just introduce yourself and just say what you do and a bit about your background. Or Marianne, go ahead.
Okay. Is this on?
Yes.
Yep. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marianne Steidinger. I'm Director of Product Marketing for Invensys/Schneider Electric. I've been working in industrial automation for many, many years, 30 plus. And I've been working in cloud computing, doing it from a marketing and sales perspective for about 3 years now. Invensys and Microsoft have a strategic alliance that we've been co-developing products, industrial automation products for the cloud. We've worked actually with Peter, and we've done a number of educational things over the past couple of years. So for me, it's really interesting just to see what's been going on, the wonderful progression, and learning. Looking forward to listening to all of you and find out what your questions are.
Thanks. Hello. Jim Balsam from Owens Corning. I'm a Director of Innovation for Manufacturing Science and Technology. I've spent my career with Owens Corning bouncing a little bit back and forth between engineering, IT, and now R&D. And prior to this, I ran all global IT operations for Owens Corning. My area of responsibility right now includes all of our manufacturing shop floor technology globally across 90 plus plants, and responsible for driving productivity and innovation in the space of manufacturing for Owens Corning.
My name's Alan Henchman. I'm the Global Marketing Director for GE Intelligent Platforms in our infrastructure lines, which is water, mining, and oil and gas. And we're actually way down the line of thinking about how SCADA customers and automation customers can leverage not only internal private clouds, but also we're developing products now that we call appliances, which are purpose-built, outcome-focused, cloud-based monitoring systems, and the first one launched in October, which was around lift stations for rural municipalities, where we're really beginning to look at what is the value equation that we can deliver by taking the cloud, changing the cost for folks who have never considered automation, and driving a value there. So we're really kind of thinking about cloud in a lot of very unique ways.
Quickly again, I think you introduced, but Vijay George runs water, sewer, stormwater operation for City of Cincinnati. Primary focus from the cloud perspective is one of the largest projects we are at this point in implementation, which is operating watershed as a system. Like you run a treatment plant, we would like to bring the whole system into a cloud platform and then run that. That's one of the current project, which is one of the largest projects we have on the cloud going on right now.
My name is Schultz from ATT. I'm a principal architect for one of our sales teams. I'm actually aligned to the manufacturing channel. So from an ATT perspective, I'm aligned to manufacturing. And my focus is on innovation, both in the telecom space, but also for our clients. So my experience in cloud is actually, before I had this role, I was in our product development team. And I worked on a project to actually tie our ATT network into the Microsoft cloud. So you might have seen the Azure pictures up there. So what ATT does, apart from running our own cloud, to actually tie in our network into multiple cloud vendors, such as Microsoft Azure, the IBM Equinix, and some other names you will have seen coming up over if you dig more into the cloud technologies. So that's my experience in the cloud.
Raj, we know you. Would you like to say anything more? Or we,
well, if you have any propeller head questions, I have. My background is I do have a PhD in nonlinear control theory and robotics, so I'm ready for you.
Okay. So listen. So this you've heard some interesting things. I'm sure we've talked about applications and industries that are already using cloud services, but we really want to have a balanced discussion. So what we'd really like to know about is your questions, because some of you may have actually done cloud implementations that may not have gone so well. So let's talk about we can talk about the cloud and the things that it does, but let's talk about the real issues like security. So please, who would like to ask the first question? And I have the mic, so I'm going to come and find you. And the only thing that we ask is that you say your name and your company. There must be a security question.
So, Dean Ford with Weston Engineering. So to take care of this here. So how do we address the cybersecurity issue in the cloud, or especially in our critical assets such as the water, wastewater plants?
Sure. You know, we do an evaluation in terms of what the threats are, what the risks are, in terms of conveying that information. Depending on the analysis, the findings of that analysis, we will end up using different communication technology. In the simplest, it would be going over a cellular data network, assuming it's something out there in the field, over the cellular data network, utilizing encryption. If it requires more, then through our analysis, we'll actually do a full VPN tunnel back into the cloud service. So our private cloud can provide both. And again, it's understanding what's the risk and how do I mitigate that. So there are different levels of protection you can provide on that communication link. And I assume it was about communicating into the cloud, the data, was your question?
Yeah.
So I'm sure others can comment on the back-end storage and everything else.
Yeah. You know, I think there's two parts to that. There's the securing the data in the cloud, and then there's the securing the data on the way to the cloud once it leaves your plant.
Right. So from ATT perspective, I can talk a little bit about what we do to get the data securely to the cloud. Right. So as I mentioned, we're actually starting to tie into the cloud provider. So it's opposed to going across a public internet connection or even VPNing, we're actually tying our network and building it right into the cloud. So you don't have to, you should have a reduced risk, right, for getting the data to the cloud. And we build these multiple layers of security to avoid getting breached. One thing that I would like to state on security, right, because there's always the question, is cloud more or less secure than what you have today? I think what we found is that just because it's so hard to find the right security experts these days in the market, that just by getting security experts together and focus on a cloud solution as opposed to multiple different premise-based solutions, we find actually it now tends to be more secure to have a cloud-based solution than have a disparate on different locations.
Any other comments from the panel?
I think I'll have just one. If we've learned anything in our voyage to the cloud, especially around rural municipal things that are deployed. In our case, it happens to be lift stations that are deployed onto neighborhoods. Security, you need to think of it in a very holistic way. It's a team sport. It's not a automation. We're going to handle something on our controller. It's not a siloed to IT, and it's not siloed off to someone like Verizon or AT&T. You need to look at that in all of your failure modes. And so when we look at a deployed asset, it has to understand, we don't get out of store and forward. You still have to have a local server that can operate if the cloud goes down. The second part of that is you've got to encrypt the data to get it ready to go onto a cellular network, because you run risk whenever you have an antenna out there of someone being able to get to that device. And then the same thing, once it gets on the cloud, if you are in a true cloud environment, you may have to make sure you have a multi-tenant and a very strong firewall between client data and your data and all those other pieces. And then on the backside of that, you have a cultural issue that you have to face into of legitimate people make bad decisions and leave iPads around or phones around that can be manipulated by folks too. So if they drop a phone at a restaurant and it's picked up and it's got the entire operations for Cincinnati there, that can cause you some problems. So you really have to think, what are all of our risks? It's not just an IT string. It's not just better controllers. It's a string that goes across cultural, technology, and operational, and pull that team together, just like they said, and understand what those risks are. And in some cases, that's going to be locking down the phones that can run that application and making sure that you're managing that in a very holistic way.
I think there was another gentleman here that had a question. Just state your name and your company, please.
My name is Enzo Tieghi, and I'm coming from Italy, and my company is Servitecno. I would like to ask, if we are speaking about cybersecurity, I'm not too worried when we are already in the computer level going to the cloud. But if we are speaking about water system, usually it's really distributed on the territory, and the connection are not always only IP connections, but there can be also GPRS, radars, and some other way of communication. So the perimeter to be protected is much larger than just a few computers and the connection to the cloud. So what can be a good approach to follow for this kind of protection?
So the question was about securing an entire perimeter, or sorry, maybe.
For sure, you have RTUs on the territory, and this can be the gate also to step into the systems. And in this kind, the leakage can be at that point for data intrusion and data. So you have to consider also that kind of an expanded perimeter to protect.
Any comments from the panel on securing infrastructure that connects to the cloud?
Well, most water and wastewater utilities in Bijou, I'm sure yours is one of these, have had vulnerability assessments done. There was a slew of them done about 10 years ago, and we're seeing another cycle of vulnerability assessments being done, started up now. So there you're looking at the physical security of your facilities. If somebody gets in, or how easy is it for somebody to get in to do malicious harm to your equipment or your water. You know, people focus a lot on the cybersecurity side, but gosh darn it, physical security is pretty darn important in a lot of these facilities. So making sure that those analysis and assessments have been done and remediated is fairly important, and going along with the previous lines, that holistic view is critical.
Just one thing I'd like to point out is a lot of times when we talk to our customers about going to the cloud, and they're not all in water, wastewater, although I think it's really interesting that the two speakers here are talking about an industry that is very large and has a lot of data. But we're also talking to customers that have pulp and paper facilities or food and beverage. And so a lot of times what they're doing is they're looking at their facilities and then doing kind of an iterative implementation of the cloud. Maybe they'll just start with reporting, and they won't put everything on there, but perhaps just the data historian, and then do a mobile access to it using a handheld device. And so that way they start to get that, as we were talking about, that cultural change, start to get people used to the application, as well as building up that infrastructure for the security, for basically how you're going to take the data and feed it into that either on-site or off-site data storage. So for us, it's really iterative.
I can speak in general about our security system, but I'm no cybersecurity. We have staff in-house who take care of that. So we take our infrastructure security extremely to the extreme extent. You know, the water contaminant warning and those kind of things are part of it. I mean, not only just the cybersecurity. I mean, the infrastructure itself is, you know, the vulnerability that we have. So as Raja mentioned, we go through regular risk assessment of and vulnerability threat assessment that we need to get to. We work with industry association and also other regulatory agencies who have a responsibility in that area, and then assure that. Specific to what exactly the appliances we use and all, I'm not able to answer that.
I think we had a question here. Lee, just state your name and company.
Lee Richards, Owens Corning. I had a question for the panel around performance on two levels. You know, when you have more traditional data centers, people will access it either on your local area network or across your wide area network. And if it is over the WAN, then you're doing maybe perhaps doing some caching with high bandwidth stuff like video. So on the one hand, how do you foresee overcoming the performance barrier to users getting data, basically always off of the wide area network? That's the first question. Second related question is, in more traditional data centers, we've got lots of servers, right, that are all linked by very high bandwidth fiber links, so that if we needed to do an integrated call between ERP system and a CRM system and a double check on the credit system, right, for a customer making a payment, all of those things happen very quickly together in the same data center. As you start moving to the cloud in pieces, parts, and you move one element to the cloud where you need an integrated element that's still in your data center, how would you address performance in that regard?
Good question, Lee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the first part of the question, and then after the second part. So you were talking about like using the wide area network more as things progress and using less computing power like locally. I think what we've seen over the years is that with like WAN acceleration and some other capabilities, that most of the latency problems that you normally would run into tend to disappear. Right? It's still, there are some, I know some banking applications, they need to make sure that like their cloud is, so like the New York City banks, their cloud is in Secaucus, right just across the water, because it has to be of a short distance. But in general, the global companies that we work with, we don't see a real big issue anymore with having to use the wide area network to get from A to B and with latency issues there. Then you mentioned like, how do you look at starting to move applications into the cloud, and how do you make sure that they can still talk to each other at a relatively high speed? And so that's really an analysis that tends to take 3 to 6 months to identify which applications can go first, which ones have to go bundled together. And then, of course, in the end, you want to make sure that you understand what your end state is. But it's, as you pointed out, it's really important that, like if you need fiber links between two applications, that you make sure that you put those applications in the same physical location when you put it into your cloud. I think that's the way we've seen it being done so far.
Marianne?
Well, again, I'm going to use my own experience, which is not necessarily, well, it's more industrial application. So one of the things that we say is that the closer you get to real-time control, the farther away from the cloud you're going to be, which means that there's kind of a natural division. And Peter actually talked about that. So if you have PLCs, if you have data historians that are required to collect very fast data and you need to respond to it quickly for alarm management or for visibility, you're not going to put that in the cloud. And I'll use Invensys example. So we have a tiered historian. What that means is you've got that real-time data acquisition, time and date stamped, on the plant floor. And then you've abstracted a second historian above that. And that one you can use for reporting and analysis. So you're doing part cloud and part on-premise. And then even though the historian that's in the cloud doesn't necessarily, the cloud is 3 different kinds, correct? So it's either private cloud, which is within your 4 walls, a hybrid, which is halfway between the two of them, and public cloud, which is the pure multi-tenancy, abstracted in a data center somewhere. So you can kind of look at what is it that you need. If you're looking for ERP in the cloud, that's very different than if you're looking at industrial automation in the cloud.
One question that we haven't really talked about too much yet. If I run an on-premise data center, I'm probably following some IT service management, and I may or may not be generating KPIs for my organization internally. But there's this concept of service level agreement, or SLA, with cloud providers. And we've seen a lot of different solutions that are now being hosted in either Amazon Web Services or AT&T or Azure or other services. What does the service level agreement look like for manufacturing, and where are the gotchas with that? This is an open question to anybody on the panel.
Well, it's somewhat related to the previous question as well. You'd be crazy to do control in the cloud. The further you delay a control loop, you're going to add inherent instabilities in that control loop. And that's provable. All the examples that I discussed were monitoring. And almost all that information is being collected and then pushed into the cloud. And and analyzed there. So your SLAs, they aren't needed to be quite as tight. So it really needs to be looked at application by application in terms of what service level agreement you have. And anything really mission critical to you, you really need to make sure that you have the redundancy in terms of links and communication in place, along with SLAs, to make sure that is happening in the timely manner that you want it to happen in.
Take a stab at that too. I mean, I think, from Owens Corning's perspective, agree. You have to look at the cloud at an abstraction level and what you're capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing. And I totally agree that we can't do real-time process control in the cloud. It just doesn't make any sense. I think the other thing is when you're constructing SLAs for an application like this, you have to consider what you're actually capable of doing yourself. And I think part of that, of course, is your infrastructure to send and transmit data to the cloud itself. And as a company that has operations in widely scattered parts of the world, including many of the BRIC countries, it's hard for me to guarantee that I'm going to have an MPLS up, for every month. Inevitably, no matter where I am in the world, I have a failure, including in the United States, which means then I lose connectivity, and then that connectivity affects an SLA, perhaps, if you haven't constructed them right. So I think it's really important to be thinking about what you're doing. And then as we look at applications, we were looking at some applications in the past year at Owens Corning around environmental reporting, and we realized that if we couldn't guarantee the transmission of the data, that it would actually put us in violation with some of our covenants of the EPA, which meant we couldn't do it in the cloud. So, I think you have to look at what your applications are you're trying to do and be very selective. And I think somebody said on the panel, take several months to analyze what those applications are so that you're not shooting yourself in the foot with either regulators or other industry requirements that you may have.
Get a partner that understands it. So like CH2M Hill or some of the other panelists here. So if you're not sure of what you need or even what makes sense to put in the cloud, or even if you need the cloud, you may not need it, but it's just another low-cost alternative. One of the things that we see that is driving cloud adoption is the fact that at the end of the day, it's lower cost to use applications. So if you're a smaller manufacturer or a smaller entity and you can't afford a big ERP system or you can't afford a big MES or even data historians, it's a really nice, I won't say inexpensive because that demeans it, but a lower cost way of getting these applications and determining if they're right for you. So that's why I say it's kind of like try before you buy.
I want to add a little bit to the specific SLA question. So apart from process control, if we look at cloud availability and accessibility, actually tends to improve, right? Because it's not really one cloud, right? You showed one building, but in reality, it's multiple buildings in different locations. One is in a hurricane zone, one is in a zone that is free from that, but that might earthquakes around it. So there's always ways to get away from danger zones. And then what we are also seeing a lot is getting mobile cloud going. So the mobile devices we've spoken about, but now really the wireless network is becoming like the backup to get into the cloud. So that gives you a second path to get to that cloud, which like if the MPLS network is down, I know it's going to be hard in the BRIC countries, but in some cases it is possible to get a wireless connection for your backup, and then your availability still goes up.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody for attending this session. I hope you found it informative, so please join me in a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.